subscapulae, M, musculocutaneous, A, axillary, R, radial. We're left only with M and U. We look for nerves over here that are heading distally in the limb, like those two. One of those is the median nerve, and one of them is the ulnar nerve. When you do this on a table, it feels like your arm has been electrocuted. You've banged your ulnar nerve, which runs across the bony prominence of the ulna there. You've banged that, but it's certainly sensitive. The median and ulnar nerve. We'll come back to these in terms of what they do in just a moment. Now let's move to this part of the limb is the antebrachium. We need that sort of terminology in our head to name these things. And if we look at this is the carpus. And if we think about these things, they are digits. And then we need to think about surfaces. We know this is cranial. We know that's caudal. We know that's palmar. And we know this is dorsal. We start using all of those terms in order to name some muscles here. We can do a couple basic actions. Either we can flex the carpus or we can extend the carpus. Either we can flex the digits or we can extend the digits. And we'll use those terms in building the names for these muscles. So we pick this big thing up here on the cranial surface of the limb and follow it, and it stops down here at the first metatarsal bones there. And if I shorten it, it causes that to happen. It extends the carpus. It's arising from an area of bone there associated with the radius. So now we put all those things together, extensor, carpus, and the radius bone, extensor, carpi, radialis. The biggest and the most medial of those cranial muscles on the forehead. Now we pick the next one up. And we kind of tug on it. And what happens is we see that it goes all the way to the digits, and it goes to all four of these digits. That being the case, when we shorten it, we can extend the digits. And since it goes to all, we'll use the term common. And now we have a common digital extensor. And that's this one. Follow that all the way down there to the digits, and we can extend the digit as the common digital extensor. Look right next to it. We're going to find a slightly smaller muscle. In this case, it's only going to go down to digits 5, 4, and 3. And it's not common, but it is on the side. Now we can make that one a lateral digital extensor. And then we get to this outside muscle here, which has kind of a mixed function, but it's on the side, associated with the ulna. So that's the ulnaris lateralis. It's actually more of a flexor than anything. Ulnaris lateralis. Or, I think Dr. P's book also calls it an extensor carpi ulnaris. You think about that? Extensor kind of extends the carpus, carpi ulnaris. The name kind of makes sense again. Alright, so those four bones there. If you like mnemonics, every cow loves you. Next, ECR. ECR would be extensor carpi radialis. C, cow, would be common digital extensor. Love would be lateral digital extensor. And U would be ulnaris lateralis. Every cow loves you. Now looking at other muscles on this part of the limb, and just in passing, everywhere I'm banging here is radial nerve sensation. This whole surface and all of those muscles, every single one. Now if I pick this tendon up, I want you to notice the direction. It's not parallel with the limb, it's running at an angle or oblique. If I use my own limb here, and I move this thumb, you can see that muscle is angular there. You can go at it two different ways. You can say, well, that direction is oblique, and I can extensor carpi obliquus, is one name we could use, or if you like other terms, human terms, that's a pollex. And if I put my hand down like so, and I move the pollex away from midline, I'm abducting. and that muscle is fairly long, so we can say abductor pollicis longus, or oblique carpal extensor based on direction. Either term's acceptable on a test. Okay, so now we got another muscle out of the way. Innervation, it's on the cranial surface, must be the radial nerve. Now let's move over to here. Go back up a ways and look underneath some of those. And right there, you see not a very big muscle. Right there, that little thing, see that? And look at its direction. Direction is everything here in terms of muscles. It's again at kind of an angle. But you can see if I shorten that, what's going to happen, the animal can lick its paw. And that, if it can lick its paw, it can eat soup out of its paw, so we'll make that a supinator, since that is supination and that is pronation. And if we've got a supinator, we probably got somebody to oppose it. So now we move from the supinator. It's on that surface, so what nerve?
The radial.
Radial. Move over here, and there's another muscle which has a different angle. It's oriented like so. Now, if I have a muscle like that and the paw is supinated and I shorten a muscle with that orientation, it will pronate. In this case, it's also round. What did we say round was? Teres. So now we got a pronator teres, which is a pronator of the forearm there. And if we look at nerves for that, we get radial again.
What was the supinator one called?
Supinator.
Supinator?
That's it, the supinator.
So the pronator muscle is still considered on the cranial
And
side?
on the cranial surface
Okay.
there, yeah. Just think about the two opposing actions. Okay, now we run out of muscles there. I believe we have. Now let's move to this side, the caudal surface. The trickiest part about this caudal surface is that there's a rather large head of a muscle, and then there's another rather large head of a muscle, and these two things tend to get confused. But when we start looking at heads of this part of the arm, you're going to have heads that arise from different places. Radial heads, ulnar heads, humeral heads. In this case, this first one here, if we look at action again, it's kind of thin slip of a muscle there. And if we follow that all the way down to the carpus and shorten it, it does this. It doesn't have anything to do with the digit, it just does this. So we're flexing the carpus. This bone here that it's arising from is the ulna, so that makes that muscle the flexor carpi ulnaris. Now that's one head of it, and if we look next to it here, this larger head is the flexor carpi ulnaris humeral head, but look at where it's going. There's a prominent sesamoid bone there, or a prominent carpal bone there. Your radiographic landmark, what is it?
The
Accessory carpal. Follow those two heads of the muscle, they'll lead you to that accessory carpal, and then they can have that action. Okay, so flexor carpi ulnaris.
So both of those are flexor carpi.
Both those are heads of a muscle that flexes the carpus. Okay, so now let's move medially here and see what we can find. Pick this one up. It's like it's rising from the humerus, and it is. I follow it all the way down there. It's crossing the carpus, and I shorten it. And the bone right here is the radius. If I shorten it, it does the same thing, except it's now the flexor carpi radialis. Same action as these, just a different position. Now look in between the two. I'm going to exclude that big head of the flexor carpi ulnaris. I've got this large thing. If I follow the tendon, it's going to go to all the digits there. So now whenever I shorten that, I get to this. That's digital flexion. This muscle is just beneath the surface, so that makes it superficial. And now we use the term superficial digital flexion. Now we collect things. Collect those two carpal flexors, collect that digital flexor, and grab everything else and lift it up. And all of those heads, which may arise from the ulna, may arise from the radius, may arise from the humerus, are all heads of a deeper muscle. Got a superficial, so the next one must be the deep digital flexor, doing this. The difference between the two is that the superficial stops at phalanx 2. And deep digital flexor in both limbs, 4 and 9, goes all the way to the third cell, the end of the digit. And that works in horses, aardvarks, you name it. Deep digital flexor goes all the way, superficial stops shortly before. Now we say, well, we're out of muscles. No, we're not quite out of muscles. Now we're going to hold this open like that. In between the bones there, in that interosseous space, you see another muscle. And that muscle is in between the bones, and if we shorten it, it also has this kind of basic action, especially in humans. It tends to pronate the limb. So a nice name, it's 4-sided. And if we look at the 4 sides, they look a little like geometry again. We call it the pronator quadratus, as opposed to the other one was pronator caries, which is a round pronator. This is a 4-sided pronator. Right in between the bones. That looks like it's just filling it in. Now the reason I hammer about this is because if I dig down into that muscle, like so, and we had a limb here that's been injected with latex, in that space, in that interosseous space, we can find a nice artery. So if an animal suffers trauma to the limb here, then blood supply to the foot will still be preserved because that vessel is protected in between those 2 bones. And it's on this surface, which is caudal. It's in between the bones, so a nice name would be
Osseous.
caudal interosseous artery. A useful supply to the rest of the limb there and prevent the trauma.
What was the name of the muscle again?